tuned into the DOHP Signal. I'm Hanley, your host, military medic, author of Photos from the Front Lines, and the founder of DOHP. With me today, I have David Dachinger. He's a retired fire lieutenant, author, podcast magnate, filmmaker, and has his hand in every little pie going around. David, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Derek, it's my pleasure. I'm always glad to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. When my book was coming out, it was really great, and I'm still going through and mining golden nuggets from it to be able to put up. And we had some great points, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective on some of the things you have going on. So, for those of you who don't maybe know who you are right off the bat, give us a little bit about your background. How did you get into firefighting? What was that kind of like for you? And kind of how have you talk about some of the things you segued into since retiring?
Yeah, well, like you, I come from a creative background, so I was fully immersed in a career in the music business. We moved from New York City up to the suburbs and bought a house next to the firehouse of all places. And I was a little bit concerned that I was going to be woken at 3 o'clock in the morning by sirens and trucks coming and going. So what it actually turned into was being invited over to barbecue, meeting some of the guys, getting invited to a drill, keeping an open mind because I had no prior involvement really with anything like this before. And I found myself getting drawn into that world, to the all the cool stuff about firefighting and eventually EMS as well. I did it as a volunteer for about 10 years, and then I still felt like there was another level to go to that I wanted to achieve. And so I started testing. I got hired and went to work for a department that was a smaller department in Connecticut. And we did EMS fire side by side, cross train, kind of always kind of shifting between one apparatus or the other, even in the midst of a call. So it was one of the beautiful things about a small department. You could literally start off on the engine, wind up riding a call into the hospital, and then, become shift commander, like, a little bit later when the captain was riding an EMS call in. So anything was possible. You had to be pretty prepared, and I loved every minute of it.
Now, you mentioned being in the music industry. I think that's a facet that I don't know too many people in the first responder industry know that's a background of yours. But talk a little bit about your involvement in that. You did producing, mixing, that type of stuff.
Started out, I started out in the recording studio, recording and mixing artists from, American artists, but also some from Latin America. So that involved some travel. But people like to come to New York to record. It was kind of cool to say, hey, I went to New York and recorded at the Hit Factory or wherever. Occasionally we go to Miami and do some recording down there. And once music started shifting from what I liked into rap and hip hop, nothing against it, but it just wasn't my thing. I thought it was time for a change. So I shifted into writing music for TV sports and then did that for probably another 10, 15 years. Some of that while I was a firefighter.
Impressive. What were some of the artists that you enjoyed working with?
In the studio, I think I can say that I recorded the first American recording of Celine Dion when she was getting started. I worked with Roberta Flack, who was an amazing singer, Usher, who had a very successful career, and some of the people from the Isley Brothers, did a couple of albums with them. So yeah, I got to work with some really cool people, and I still see some of them are out there making music today, which is great to see.
And studio work is something that I always thought would be a fun gig because you're able you're kind of behind the scenes with the artists and get to see the process and be part of it, and taking their what they have and kind of distilling it into album form so that it can be distributed to the masses. I always thought was kind of a cool thing to do. So a little bit of music industry jealousy on that, on being able to do that, David. Really cool. It's and then interesting to go into the public safety too from that. It's interesting that there's crossover, like you're saying, kind of with both of us, and I'm sure other people in the industry you see similar types of things. But what skills kind of transferred over from music to fire and EMS? Because you're obviously very attuned to sound and sensory input, things like that. You're recognizing patterns, things like that. So that's interesting to think about too, where what skills may have crossed over from those two industries. So you did the fire thing for a while, and then, obviously anyone who's done public safety for any length of time understands the mental health impact that it has on the providers who do this work. So was there any sort of kind of powder keg that got you interested in wanting to talk and have discussions around this topic? Or was it just kind of the cumulative, you see the effect of what it has on yourself and your comrades over the course of a career kind of a thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I came up probably the same as you did in a time when the culture was basically telling us that silence equals strength, right? We don't talk about this stuff. You
Suffer in
just,
silence. Yeah.
yep, get back in the rig, move on, get the next call. The calls are waiting. And so I had a few different events that at the time didn't really hit me as such, but now when I look back on it, I see they were actually kind of setting the stage for what I wound up doing in my next chapter. Couple of examples. One is there was a guy in our department, a military veteran, deployed in Iraq, who came back and wound up working for the fire department
Mm,
and didn't really get to resolve some of the traumas he was carrying before
mm,
he came to the job. And there was I think, few clues that it was a cry for help. Nobody in the department was really addressing it head on. And eventually, one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, my engine was dispatched to a motor vehicle accident, car into telephone pole. And so, the dispatcher called me up and said, "Hey, it's so and so, one of our guys."
mm.
And so, on arrival, saw a pretty horrendous accident scene. Fortunately, he was not significantly hurt, but
Oh,
also saw, this is kind of like when there's no training for supervisors, officers, lieutenants, captains, when there's no oversight from the top, where there's any programs in place or resources being provided, we were all just kind of like winging it, right? And
mm,
so that made an impact on me that I later reflect back on as being one of those moments you're referring to.
hmm
Personally, I was involved in a potentially catastrophic fatal event. I was doing an interior attack or searching for the seat of a fire in a structure where someone vented a window from the outside and created a flashover. So I was
mm.
literally standing up in a pretty intense situation. Fortunately, I was not hurt, but there was no discussion, right? The chief was like concerned about the hardware. He's like, "We need to replace your gear. It was burnt, completely crisp." I said,
How
"Sure, no
about my
problem."
brain?
But how about the
How
software?
crispy is that? Yeah.
So again, I just kind of carried it, but I that is something I did bring to
Mm,
EMDR therapy to process
hmm
later because, as you well know, there's calls that haunt you that we play over and over again. We just think of how we could have done it different. We should have done this. We should have done that. And I just needed some relief from that.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for sharing. And I found EMDR to be helpful. I've tried a number of modalities. CBT, let's go through the acronyms, CBT, RTMS, I don't know if you've heard of that one, the transcranial
Mhm.
magnetic stimulation, EMDR, and I don't know if you've heard of ACT therapy, ACT therapy,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's one that the last couple therapists that I've had have been ACT focused, and I found that to be extremely helpful. It's kind of like the next wave from CBT of, not so much trying to dispute your thoughts, but just more accepting that these thoughts are coming up, these reactions are going to happen, and continuing to act, kind of in the direction, ACT being part of the the acronym there, accept, choose, take action. So that's been a great one for me. I think in this job too, we and it's and podcast industry too, we like to talk about the rough calls and things like that, and emphasize the toll that this job takes and the sacrifices that these people make who do this job. But there's also bright moments and there's good calls that come. I'm wondering if you have any that come to mind that stick out on the kind of positive side of doing this job, because you probably have, correct me if I'm wrong, would you say, one call to every nine that's a happy, positive one versus a sad or depressing or a kind of a bummer call. Would you agree?
Yeah, they probably don't come in that, exact ratio, right? We probably do have some shifts where they're all crap calls and some shifts where they're much more like uplifting. But I mean, one that sticks out, and I appreciate you putting that perspective on it, because one thing I see with all of us that do this work is we tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on the calls that didn't go well because we're really not trained how to cope with failure. We're not, we don't know how to be in that point of feeling helpless, and it really takes us out. So when we can focus on good ones and kind of look at a body of work, okay, I had, X number of bad calls in my career, but also I had probably 10 times that number of positive calls. And one that comes to mind was I got up early at the firehouse, got on the step mill. I'm doing my thing with my weight vests, and about 6 o'clock in the morning, dispatch comes on saying, got to head up north to probably came in as a, unresponsive patient. And so I was driving the ambulance that day. I drove up there with the medic. The engine was there, met us. And it was a, relatively young guy in bed, and he was, he was in arrest. And so we worked him on scene, got him out, transported him as quick as we could. And we had the unbelievable experience of having him walk into the firehouse with his family a couple of months later and just say, hey, I'm still here. You guys made a difference. So that's one of them that sticks out.
Golly, that gives me goosebumps just hearing that. That's I haven't had that particular instance where someone's the patient themselves, but I've had one time where we showed up and it was a woman in probably her 80s or 90s, elderly, unresponsive, not looking good, pale, sweaty, the whole like, uh-oh, oh shit pit, which I tell my students that you get when you walk in, you lay eyes, like, oh shit. Like she was an oh shit pit. Family's freaking out. One of them is a nurse. So we load the patient up, get her on the monitor, and her heart rate's like 40. I was like, aha. So I called into the doc because we had to call at that point to give atropine. So I was like, hey doc, heart rate 40. What do you think? Should we give some atropine? He's like, yeah, go ahead. So gave her, I think it was just point 0.5. She starts, heart rate comes up. She starts perking up. She starts talking. I get her laughing. I'm giving her daughter's riding on the front. I was like, hey, we're giving atropine. Here's heart rate, this or that, giving her an update and whatnot. We show up at the hospital and I go into the room. The family's already there. And she's laughing, we're joking, and she's like, what did you do? Like, what is this magic? We thought she was dead, and now she's joking and up and this and that. So that made me think of that. But you mentioned we tend to remember the negative, and I think from my research I've done is that the brain value tags negative experiences more heavily in the mind because we don't want bad things to happen, and we want to learn from bad things, and we want to be able to recall bad things to make sure that they don't happen again. And so that's why, our brain has a negativity bias. I think that you put it well as a body of work. I think it would do most first responders well to keep a log of the good things and the positive things and the saves and, any little thing like that, because that's what we should be reflecting on, on those dark days or when when having those moments of crisis, because, you have done quite a lot, despite there maybe being some ones that didn't go so well. And, obviously in the moment, everyone did the best they could to try and help. And you have to kind of, get to a point of acceptance with some of those things. But it's always good to hear the good calls because I know they're in there as well. Now you've been hosting Responder Resilience for quite some time. How many episodes would you say you've done so far?
We just hit 250. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I guess in this podcast world, that's we're dinosaurs.
That's an impressive array of episodes, my friend. What are some of the pearls you've gotten? Because you've talked to a lot of people in the industry. You've talked to a lot of folks who've done this job and have struggled and persevered and things like that. So, what are some of the pearls you've gotten over the episodes of talking to these folks?
Well, I think the key thing is, we started this at a time when there was a lot of shift in our world to talking about the story and talking about the trauma, and that made a lot of sense at the time. But we started realizing we need to start moving beyond that. Like, what are the tools that people are using to process this trauma, and what are the wins? What's the post-traumatic growth look like? So
Mm-hmm.
we've, spoken to so many people that have amazing post-traumatic growth stories. I mean, the one that comes to mind right off the top of my head, and we've had him on several times, is Daniel Sundahl.
Mm.
He is, I mean, not only did he have a career as a firefighter and a medic, but he also at some point started integrating art as his personal therapy, but also shared it out to the world. And the response was unbelievable. It resonated with so many people and sort of helped them in that way. But he took it another step further, right? He talks about his post-traumatic growth journey as one of his presentations, and he became a therapist. That's what he's doing now that
Mm.
he's retired. So now he's able to take all that experience, the body of work, the post-traumatic growth, and repurpose that in his next chapter. So just seeing people who are able to, flourish after adversity and take the negative experiences that we have in life and take that, pay it forward in a positive way. That's one of the things that just keeps it interesting all the time.
Man, the world needs more therapists, especially ones who understand what first responders have to go through, the challenges, the bad calls, the late nights, all the things that go into that. That's tremendous. David, talk to me a little bit about helping the helpers, because this is kind of in line with what we've been talking about here, and this seems a little bit like a distillation of kind of like we're saying of a lot of the information that you've gleaned, the experts you've talked to, and some of the ways that they think that they can help folks who may read it. So talk a little bit about the genesis of the book, and where you're at right now with it.
It makes perfect segue actually, because we started looking at, what the content of our podcast was and how do we take it beyond that? What's next? We had started a sub-series called The Clinician's Guide, where we wanted to inform clinicians who want to work with our population about some really specific things, like what's it like to work with law enforcement? What's it like
Mm,
to work with veterans who are first responders?
mm-hmm,
What's the family dynamics you need to know?
mm,
What are the legal, liability, confidentiality implications? How do you set up a practice that's sustainable, where you're going to be able to create an environment where first responders feel safe coming in and talking and protect yourself, right, from burnout, from vicarious trauma and all that. So we did this sub-series, and then after a conversation with a friend of mine on the beach who is a brilliant podcast person, an audiobook person, she told me she had a technology she had evolved for taking podcasts and turning them into books. So it's not like AI writing the book. It's more like AI creating a catalog, a database, so you can pull from different episodes. If you're writing a chapter on law enforcement, you know where all
mm,
these, source material comes from. So
mm-hmm.
we did the book, and so we covered a lot. And it's not just for clinicians, it's for anybody that works with us, right? Chaplains, EAP, leaders,
Mm-hmm.
families, peer support, you name it. So we did like 11 separate chapters for the roles, because the firefighter's trauma is not going to look the same as a 911 dispatcher, and a
Mm-hmm.
correction officer's burnout is not going to look the same as a undercover operative. So
Right.
deep dive into all of those, and then all these things like, the weight that we carry. What do people need to know about the trauma behind the badge? So one of the things that we looked at is the burnout piece, right? There's burnout is kind of prevalent in our industry, and where's that coming from? There's a number of factors. There's a number of physiological factors, right? Traumatic brain injury, the sleep issue, which is huge.
Mm.
I'm not even sure how many chapters we have, but we did a, fairly deep dive into all of these things. Talked about EMDR therapy. Talked about, peer support. How does someone set up CISD, SISM teams? And so we tried to make it this, comprehensive guide. It's not a textbook. It's more of a guide with lots of stories about the humans behind the badge.
Mm. What a gift to the world. Where can folks find this book, especially if they're clinicians looking to help augment their practice?
It's on Amazon. That's the easiest place to find it. Our website also has more information on it, which is respondertv.com.
Awesome. I'm talking with David Dachinger. This is Derek Hanley, host of the Dope Signal. Stay right there. We'll be right back after these messages.
Derek Hanley here, a photographer, a videographer, a veteran combat medic.
Derek Hanley is with us today.
We have on the line with us Derek O'Hanley. What a remarkable book. Obviously, you had no idea when you embarked on this journey of embedding with paramedics and, frontline responders. There was no way to know that a worldwide pandemic was on its way.
His goal was to document the day-by-day life-saving that they do. And now you can experience what it was like.
He's done a book that should be a coffee table book in homes and offices. It's something in the office that somebody's going to pick up, look at, and be moved by. This is the book.
Our military protects us overseas. Our first responders are the ones who protect us at home. And we need to start thinking about what we can do to take care of medics like we do for our military.
The book is Photos from the Front Line.
Photos from the front line.
Photos from the front lines.
Photos from the front lines.
So that's DOHP, it's DOHP.net, and you can find Derek's book there.
All right, welcome back to the DOHP Signal. I'm here with David Dachinger. David, talk to me a little bit about 220. I know it's an organization you're involved with. You're a mentor. Tell us about what this is for folks who don't know about it, and what your role is currently with it.
One of the things about having a podcast is you get contacted by all kinds of people who want to share their mission with the world. And one of those missions was 220. I interviewed them a couple of years ago, probably 3-4 years ago. And when I learned what they do, I actually went through the process myself. So this was brought to life by two people initially. One is a retired law enforcement and Army vet, and the other is an Air Force vet. And they created two processes that address traumatic events and they address distressing emotions. Doesn't require talking about it. It's absolutely free to any first responder, family member, military veteran. And so it kind of removes all the barriers, right? You don't have to pay for anything. There's no insurance. It doesn't get reported to any agency. We treat it like a 911 call. When somebody contacts 220, I try to schedule them to get them in as soon as possible. And it works fast. It's like typically 2 to 5 sessions help someone move through whatever it is they came in with. So powerful stuff. It's, I think I've seen a lot of people have amazing success with it, and that's really rewarding for me because, I'm bringing not only whatever skills I have as a 220 coach, but also my life experience and my experience doing this job that we've been talking about. So some of that is, it's also just the power of peer support, right? We just, sometimes I'll work with retired firefighter who just has never, since they retired, they don't really have a chance to talk about the job anymore. And so part of I think the healing process is just for them to speak to somebody who kind of gets it and to, incorporate that into the process that we do together.
Do you have any success stories that you could share, either from your personal experience or others in the organization that have gone through this program? Yeah,
I'll speak in general terms, and I always see this as like a sign that somebody has kind of moved into, past what was holding them back, and that's generally they're re-engaging with life in ways that they weren't before. So that could look like someone who's now gotten back into art, if they played with art before, or they're back into music, into nature. They're re-engaging with people. And I've seen that multiple times. Like, it's kind of like that, that bright light that comes on when you've been in the darkness for so long. You have people who have, opening up to taking responsibility for things, maybe in their marriage, where now they're going to therapy to work on that piece. Again, it's the post-traumatic growth thing, right? When somebody's kind of cleaned up some of the weight that they've been carrying, we all carry this stuff, and they clean up that weight that they've been carrying for a long time. All of a sudden there's like, they feel like a sense of freedom, and they can go out and do things that they haven't done in a long time. And that could be simple as exercise, could be as simple as, getting out there and participating in social events. So those are some of the things that I've experienced, not to mention people who were ready to quit the career, right? And you don't want to see somebody leave who's still got years of, potential good years ahead of them, to see them reframe this work. And it ties back to what you were saying, Derek, about, we can focus so much on the negative, lose sight of the body of work, and just say, you know what, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Well, I've seen people who've gone through 22-0 who look at the work differently and now can continue with their careers.
What a blessing. What a blessing this organization is, and folks like you who continue to help and serve those who are still serving or have served before. I mean, amazing. And it seems like organizations like this kind of have to fill the gaps that aren't in the infrastructure of public safety already. And a lot of these measures are beautiful, but seem to be reactive in nature. And it seems like there should be, and again, I'm just my amateur opinion as a provider, I've never been a chief or anything like that, so I can't speak to the bureaucratic workings of departments and things like that. But it seems to me that there should be, some sort of in-house proactive mental health providers. And I know that certain organizations are starting to do things like that, but it's pretty few and far between from my understanding. Are you seeing some of the proactive changes coming into live departments as we speak, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I think it's really starting to speed up exponentially. It's hard to have a really objective view because we tend to interview people on the podcast who are focused on that work. But I will hear from time to time about somebody who's like in a department where that's just the furthest thing from, having any kind of mental wellness program is just not even on the horizon. So, but it does, speak to why we started this documentary film, Saving the Brave, because we are essentially creating a storyline of showing a couple of really horrific events, some of them really high profile, the Surfside collapse in Miami, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting, and then a suicide of a fire lieutenant in Florida. And that led our principal subject, Marie Guma, to come up with the idea of having what she calls a behavioral health manager embedded in fire department. And what that looks like, it kind of speaks to what we were just talking about. No cost to the firefighter, doesn't get reported, doesn't go through insurance. So it's a lot of, anonymity, takes down all the barriers. She's had amazing success with it. So we got that. We got the origin story, the solution, and then we want to tell the success stories. And beyond that, we also want to show other resources that can help departments put together a program like this. We want to pull back the curtain on things like we were talking about at EMDR. What does that look like, right? I mean, as first responders, we might imagine, they're going to put electrodes on our head and we're going to be doing some kind of crazy science, mad science thing. We want to show that. We want to show what does inpatient treatment look like. That's another thing. So-and-so went to the, whatever, the treatment center for inpatient because they had a substance abuse problem. And we have no idea what that looks like. So we're going to show things like that and try to really create a template for any department, like you were describing, that really wants to start a mental wellness program. This will give them like the model to look at.
Where are you at in the production? Do you have a kind of time frame for when you're thinking that the film is going to be released?
So we're early in the principal photography. We've started that. We have in the midst of scheduling other locations. We're going to be moving around a little bit to do some of this filming. Our goal is to have it out of post ready to distribute by first quarter of 2027.
Ambitious time frame, but knowing your ambition, I'm sure you'll have no problem making that happen. Is there anywhere people can go to get more information about that?
Yeah, so we do have an Instagram page. That's kind of our first offering out there about the film. It's on Instagram. It's at Saving the Brave.
At Saving the Brave. Sounds great. What brought you into the film industry now? You've been in the music industry, first responder industry, now the film industry. What led to this?
This is one of those things where things come together. Again, the podcast is sort of responsible in a way. One of our interviews was with Jason Hanley, who I'd kind of known from LinkedIn, but I saw he was making a number of movies about first responders, particularly law enforcement. And so we interviewed him a while back, but we've stayed in touch. And then when the time came that this idea for Saving the Brave was starting to germinate, I contacted Jason. We started having some meetings, and turns out he was the perfect person to direct this and to bring it to life. So it's kind of exciting because he's he knows our world, right? It's not like somebody coming in from the outside. He's totally understands more from the law enforcement side, but he's totally understands what it's like to be a first responder and to how to capture that on film.
Man, that's exciting stuff. I can't wait to see it when it comes out. Sounds like it's going to be another paradigm shifting, helpful thing for everyone in this industry. And kudos for you for, I know it's not an easy effort. I know it's going to be a lot of headache and probably late nights trying to get this thing made, but I'm sure the fruits of it will be more than valuable to everyone who gets a chance to experience it. So thank you again for your continued efforts to help the first responder community and help everyone be well and live a good life. So great. David, do you have any final thoughts for the audience before we wrap it up? And I'll give you a chance to plug what you have coming up here.
Absolutely. So I think just to all our brothers and sisters who are in the first responder world, just know, and this is something I found out by trial and error, but suffering is optional. There is help out there. There are resources out there. We're really good at taking care of others. We're not so good at taking care of ourselves, and that's that's not necessary. We worked really hard. We've done a lot for others, and it's time we put ourselves into that equation so we can continue to help others.
Well put. What do you got coming up? What do you got to plug?
Really, we covered it, right? The book, the film, the podcast. So respondertv.com is where you can find the book and the podcast. Some great episodes coming up this summer. We're super excited. We, always breaking a little more new ground in terms of the topics and how deep we're going with stuff that people weren't talking about, say, 5-10 years ago. So exciting times, and just happy to be a small part of it.
Right on. David, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. Man, I feel like we could talk for 5 hours about all the things you got going on. Thank you again. Great speaking with you. Be well.
Thanks, Derek. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to the DOHP Signal. Tune back in for the next episode.